women in history I never heard of and wouldn't be surprised if you haven't either. Today, let's talk about Frances Perkins. Frances Perkins was born in 1889 and passed away in 1965. She was one of the most important people in United States history, and far too many of you have never even heard her name. She grew up in pride in her country. Frances was also brilliant, as demonstrated by things like learning Greek at the age of 8. When she went to school, she encountered something her parents never intended for her to concern herself with: poverty. She went home and asked her mother how nice people could be poor. Her mom told her what lots of folks like to believe: "Oh, honey, it's their fault. They chose it because they're lazy and drunks." Her dad reminded her that girls were never supposed to concern themselves with such things. They should focus on finding a husband. Well, Frances was brilliant, and she did concern herself with those things. After graduating from Worcester's Classical High School, Frances enrolled in Mount Holyoke College. The school's founder, Mary Lyon, believed that education was more than learning. It carried responsibility. She'd said, "Go where no one else will go. Do what no one else will do." And Frances very clearly took that to heart. At Mount Holyoke, she majored in physics and minored in chemistry and biology. She was popular. Class president. Well, she also took a class taught by Anna May Soule regarding the growth of industrialism in England and America. One of her assignments involved observing working conditions at the mills along the Connecticut River. There, Frances saw women and children working in inhumane conditions. Nothing to protect their safety. No requirements for time off or limits on the number of hours they could work. If they were injured, oh fucking well, the mill hired another kid, and the injured starved. Frances was concerned. When she graduated in 1902, her parents wanted her back home, working a simple job until she fulfilled her true calling: finding a husband, of course. Instead, she concerned herself with New York City's slums and exactly the types of people her dad said girls shouldn't. Ultimately, she accepted a teaching position and moved to Lake Forest, Illinois. In Chicago, Frances spent her spare time and vacations concerning herself with working with the poor at Chicago Commons and Hull House. They were two of the oldest settlement houses in the United States, but she further concerned herself with helping on a larger scale. In 1907, she accepted a position as general secretary of a new organization, the Philadelphia Research and Protective Association. Their concern? Keeping girls who'd newly immigrated and Black women from the South from being forced into prostitution. Oh, and she also studied sociology and economics at the University of Pennsylvania. I told you she was brilliant. Did you think I was fibbing? Anyway, in 1909, she was at the New York School of Philanthropy. You know what she did there? I'll tell you. She investigated malnutrition in New York City's Hell's Kitchen. No, not the one with Gordon Ramsay. And that became her master's thesis. She became executive secretary of the New York City Consumers League. Their concern was bakery sanitation regulations, fire protection in factories, and getting legislation in place to limit the number of hours that women and children could work to 54. She also learned how to be an effective lobbyist. Oh, Frances did get married in 1913, but her husband was kind of a piece of shit cheater. Before she could leave, she discovered she was pregnant. So she stayed and unfortunately and ultimately suffered a miscarriage, a second pregnancy, a C-section, a stillbirth. But on 30th December 1916, Frances gave birth to a daughter. But then her hubby started showing signs of mental illness, and he ended up in and out of institutions for the remainder of his life, leaving Frances supporting him financially since he'd pissed away his inheritance on bad investments. Frances eventually got married again and had a son. Okay, but let's back up a little bit to the 25th of March, 1911 in New York City. Frances was having tea with friends. Then fire trucks went screaming by. She ran to the scene of the fire with others. At the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory, the doors had been chained shut to keep the workers in. With no way through the doors to avoid being burned, Frances and others watched in horror as 47 workers, mostly women, chose the windows on the 7th and 8th floors. In all, 146 people lost their lives that day. Later, Frances said that was the day the New Deal was born. Wait, you thought a guy did that? By then, she was recognized as an expert in worker health and safety. Brought legislators along on factory investigations so they might possibly concern themselves with just how fucked up money makes things. She successfully lobbied, and laws were passed for worker safety. I need you to keep something in mind. She did all of that in a time when she wasn't even allowed to vote yet. So, 1918. And the governor's race, the first time women could vote in New York. She lobbied hard to get the women's votes for her colleague, Al Smith. When he won, he appointed her to the New York State Industrial Commission. That made her the first woman to hold an administrative position in the New York State government. Her annual salary, $8,000, or about $170,000 in 2025. That made her the highest paid woman ever in public office. She held positions in the Factory Investigating Commission and the Industrial Commission, concerning herself with things like weeding out corruption and enforcing laws. But those weren't her only or most significant firsts. In 1928, a new governor was elected in New York. His name, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and he appointed Frances the state's industrial commissioner. She oversaw the entire labor department and became the most prominent state labor official in the country. I'm sure you've already guessed, but dudes didn't like that. Oh, but FDR, he didn't stop there. 1933, he was the newly elected president of the United States and asked Frances to serve as Secretary of Labor. Before she would accept, she insisted he meet her conditions: a 40-hour work week, no more child labor, federal aid to states for unemployment, Social Security, a revitalized federal employment service, and universal health care. FDR said he endorsed them all, and Frances Perkins became the first woman in the United States to serve in a presidential cabinet. Her conditions were the framework of the New Deal. That was a series of social, economic, and political reforms for which FDR gets the credit. She worked to ensure funds were used on socially useful projects: schools, roads, housing projects. Frances also would not accept racism. She once threatened to pull funding when dipshits in the South were refusing to hire black folks. But wait, there's more. In 1934, FDR appointed her the head of the Committee on Economic Security. And that's when she drew up the blueprint for the legislation that became the Social Security Act, which was signed into law on the 14th of August, 1935. Oh yeah, but there's still more. In 1938, Congress enacted the Fair Labor Standards Act, which was developed, with her help. That established a federal minimum wage and maximum working hours, got rid of child labor. When she left the Department of Labor in 1945, she stood in the auditorium and personally shook hands and thanked 1,800 employees. Truman appointed her to the U.S. Civil Service Commission. After that, she moved on to teaching, writing, and giving public lectures. She wound up working at Cornell University until basically the day she passed away. Yeah, but let's not forget, she was a woman in positions of power. So of course they had to vilify her. During the Red Scare, which was this whole fear of communism thing, political opponents claimed she had lied about her name and birth date. She had to prove she had been born in the United States. Huh, sound familiar? Reporters were scandalized that she had kept her maiden name through 2 marriages. They judged her by bullshit criteria that men never were subjected to. And yet, she persevered. She changed the lives of generations, millions upon millions of people in the United States. In 1980, the U.S. Department of Labor HQ was named for her. As of the end of 2024, there's a national monument dedicated to her. There's the Frances Perkins Center, and a shit ton of government programs that modern politicians are literally tearing down. She fought for the average person, you and me, even when she was told not to concern herself with such things, even when her heart was breaking. But her appearance, because see, for most of her life, she had dressed matronly. She was seen as masculine because she was willing to work long hours. Feminine because she gave a shit. Okay, but why not just call her a person? If a woman has the nerve to do that and care more, and has the nerve to do the same things men do as far as work, working long hours, she risks being diminished as a woman and being erased from history because she concerned herself with the things that men would